Let's talk about life, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the truth and consciousness, divinity. Let's talk about God. Let's talk about love.
Welcome to Spiritual Nerd, and I'm your host, Ninette Terhart, and today we are geeking out with Regina Dawn Akers. Thank you, Dawn, so much for joining us today. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
For those of you just tuning in, I just want to read a little bit about Regina here. From corporate America to being a faithful student of A Course in Miracles, Regina has become a channel for one of the most powerful spiritual books in recent times, Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. She has been sharing spiritual teachings, organizing retreats, and leading pilgrimages to holy sites since 2005. Wow. She's published 2 books, The Holy Spirit's Interpretation of the New Testament, NTI, and The Teachings of Inner Ramana. Her 3rd book, Thoughts of Awakening, 365 Thoughts for Daily Contemplation, is provided as a free ebook, so that's very cool. Each of these books come to Regina from within through her willingness to be their scribe, student, and teacher. Regina is a living model of their teachings and a clear channel for the deeper meaning that lies behind the written word, or beyond the written word. Regina is the founder of Awakening Together, a worldwide online spiritual community dedicated to helping people become self-reliant with inner spiritual wisdom. Wow, Regina. Well, thank you so much for hanging with me today and geeking out.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've been reading quite a bit about you and just, catching the vibe. And you've had quite a journey of that sort of, the ego and then the listening and then so there's been a lot of back and forth as one sort of journeys. Can you share about that journey and how that all kind of unfolded?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the journey appeared to begin. I mean, when I look back on my earlier life, I can see little snippets of it before, but it seemed to really begin on a particular day on a Disney cruise when I decided to start A Course in Miracles, and I said a prayer. And in my prayer, I said, I will do anything. I will learn anything you want me to learn, do anything you want me to do. Just make me useful for the rest of my life. And what I didn't know was that in that moment, my whole life began to change. And I began to see signs of that, clear signs. And a couple of months after that, I began to have visions. And it was the following November when I began to hear an inner voice. So I began to receive this clear inner guidance. But at the same time, I became aware of what ego was. I mean, I didn't even know what ego was when I started. So I became aware of what ego was, and I became acutely aware of my own ego in a very painful way. So there were 2 things that were going on, was this absolute clarity and then this painful awareness of my own ego. And I went through that for about 5 years. I call that my 5-year purification phase. And during that time, I learned to let go of several key false beliefs. I let go of things like the belief in rejection, the belief in betrayal, the belief that I could be used by someone, the belief that other people had to be honest. The ridiculous belief I see now. And probably the most important one that I let go of is what the Course calls guilt. It's kind of unworthiness, guilt, shame, all in one. I call it the I am bad belief. Also let go of psychological fear, worrying about the future, that kind of thing. I always tell people I don't know that I wouldn't feel fear if something urgent happened. Like I hike a lot, and if I saw a mountain lion looking at me, I can't say I wouldn't feel fear. But I don't actually know that I would either, because I've had a couple of close calls, like in the vehicle. I was driving with someone who began spinning and spinning, and another time a deer jumped out in front of me, and I felt no fear in either of those situations. So I can't say I would feel fear. I just can say I don't know if I would. Right. Yeah. But a lot of things were let go during this 5 years. So after that first 5 years, things have settled and they're much simpler. But it doesn't mean that things don't still come up to be let go. It's just before it was like constant. And now it's like this even piece, and then something comes up, I let it go.
So there is hope.
Pardon?
There is hope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, God. Well, I just love that you said that, actually, because I started the course about a year ago. But prior to that, I was doing a lot of listening to Joel Goldsmith and Herb Fitch and stuff. So that part of my life kind of clicked in, where I'm like, okay, there's got to be a different way here to live on this plane. So it's been a couple of years of what you're talking about, like just kind of like, ripping it out. And when you said after 5 years, there's like this kind of balance, I was like, oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, that's what, of course, the time, varies with people, but 5 years is about what it was for me. It could be faster or slower.
Yeah, sure.
On the person. It really depends on how willing you are to let go.
Right.
If you really want to hold on to the way you think, and most people do, if you really believe that you're right in the way you think, you could not even get through that phase in this lifetime.
No.
You have to be absolutely willing to let go of the way you think.
You totally do. You really do. Now, can you share, Regina, some of the key things that really helped you in that process before you found this sort of balanced out space?
Sure. Probably the most important thing, it was my purpose. And I often called it my true north, like with the compass, it always points to the north. So I called it my north. One thing that I think gets in people's way is they actually have mixed purposes. So, for example, they may want truth or want to awaken or want to get to inner peace, but they also want their child to do this, and they want their spouse to be this way, and they want their finances to be this way. And it's all of those other mixed things that keep us from walking in a straight line. So one of the things that I learned early on was to have one purpose. And I call that awakening. And so I wanted awakening, even if it meant that I lost my house, lost my family, lost my life. Awakening was number one. And that was really important because some of the things that the ego threw at me. Now, first of all, I'll tell you, I did not lose my house. In fact, I'm in a bigger, more beautiful house than I've ever lived in. I've never had any loss of money. I haven't lost my family. None of that happened. But there were points along the way where it looked like it could.
Sure. And
those were the points where I had to really choose what's most important. And those points come up for everybody. Whatever they value, it will come up to the test, whatever you value. And so for different people, it may be different things. For some people, maybe it's health. Health has never been an issue for me. But for some people, as soon as some new symptom shows up, they're on the internet, reading everything, going to all these doctors. And what's really going on is the ego's got their mind spinning and spinning and spinning.
Yeah.
So the ego knows for each of us where our weak spots are, how to get our attention back, how to get our loyalty back. And it's always promising us salvation.
Yeah.
So we have to want awakening more than whatever those things are. ...
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that was the primary thing, because when I was faced with those moments where it looked like I was going to lose my money or whatever, I was willing to. Yeah. Now, in the end, I never did.
Right.
But see, I didn't know that going forward. It's easy to say looking back. Going forward, I didn't know that. And I always chose to look at my mind. I believed what the Course said. I believed that the world was a reflection of my mind.
Yeah.
And I believed that if there was something coming, it was because of something in me, something in my mind. Right. And I believed I had to find that and let that go, and then let whatever happened happen.
That's a key element. I love that you said that, because in my own experience, and of course in many's that I spend my life with, I see that, and it's like you have to be willing to kind of just clear that out and then go, okay, what do you want me to do? Where do I need to be? That's a big one.
Yes.
And hard to do because we are used to the counterintuitive, which is gotta do, gotta be there, gotta be special, and gotta have our opinion. And so this is very counterintuitive to the ego.
Well, and it sounds crazy, but you see, everyone wants to survive, and the ego is promising survival.
Ah, right.
So that's why people fall for the ego.
That's a good point.
So as crazy as this sounds, but I know I'm not the only teacher that would say it, if you can let go of your desire to survive, then you can move through an ego storm without believing the ego and falling for the ego, and you will come out the other side.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you said that. I know a lot of people that's gonna ring a lot of bells in a lot of people. I'd love to chat about your Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. Can you share with us sort of the unfoldment of how that occurred?
Well, sure. The first thing I did once I formally started the spiritual path was I did the Course in Miracles workbook, and during that same time I read the text twice and the manual for teachers twice. And just as I was nearing the end of the workbook, might even have been 3 days after I finished. It's harder for me to remember the timeline now, but it was right around that time. I received this inner message that asked me to read the New Testament and let the inner voice interpret it for me. And that was about the time I was moving, because I'd also received guidance to leave my job and to move. So I was moving to North Carolina. And shortly after I got to North Carolina and, everything was kind of unpacked, I received the guidance to begin. And so all that I did was I started at the beginning of the New Testament, Matthew, and all I would do was read until I felt this intuitive prompt to stop reading. And that intuitive prompt, when that would come, would vary. Like sometimes it would be like an entire story. Sometimes it would be a paragraph. Sometimes it would be a sentence. So I just had to feel for that prompt. But whenever that prompt came to stop reading, if I thought I understood what I just read, I had to let go of that first. And the way I would do that in the beginning was I would write what I thought I read meant on a mental blackboard in my mind. I would write it out, and then I would imagine taking an eraser and erasing it. And when that mental blackboard was empty and I could genuinely say, I don't know what this means, then that's when the inner voice came.
Right.
And of course, just like anything else, I got better and better. Eventually, I didn't have to go through all those mechanics. I could just read, genuinely say, I don't know what this means, and the inner voice would come. But that went on for 13 and a half months, and I read all the way from Matthew to the end of Revelation. And I was the student. I was not at all writing from what I knew. In fact, often I was very frightened writing because it was beyond my current spiritual knowledge and beyond what I believed, and it was very difficult to write it down. Of course, there were other days when I just loved what I was writing, and it was wonderful to write it down, but I wrote it down as it came, and I also each day, remember the year before I had done the Course in Miracles workbook, which has practices all day. So what I would do is I would take whatever came that morning from the New Testament, and I would spend the whole day contemplating that and in whatever way I could practicing that. So I seemed to kind of raise up with the book. So I was the student of what I was writing. And it was only later that I became the teacher.
Wow. Beautiful. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned now there's sort of this balancing. I'm sure there's still an ever-evolving unfolding.
Yes.
What's the different feel that you have now when you are doing your things on this plane that you would say are different than when you were, say, even writing that?
Oh, sure. Well, when I was writing that, I was fully a person. I'm fully very, very attached to my ego. I mean, clearly I could let go long enough to hear inner wisdom, but still, the vast majority of the day I was attached to my ego and letting go of my ego, and that book was teaching me how to do it. Now I feel much more empty. I don't feel substantial as a personality or a person. And by that, I mean, like there's a personality here, but the personality changes. It's like one way with one person and one way with another person. And, and I really feel like it's not mine or me. It's what's created in that moment. So I don't feel substantial.
I love it. Line me up. I'm loving this.
And I spend a lot of time just being aware of the awareness that I am, that is prior to mind, prior to personality, prior to body, unaffected by everything, untouched by anything. And I abide as that, even while this play of personality and body and world continues.
Yeah. And that definitely, does it get easier, or is there sort of a place that you've kind of gotten to?
The hardest part of this path for me was that first 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just no doubt about that. In fact, I think that when the Course talks about achieving inner peace, I think I have achieved that inner peace. And I think what the Course hints at that a lot of people don't realize is that inner peace is not the end.
No.
It's not the awakening. Inner peace is a stage that you get to, and then a whole nother phase of awakening is revealed. But that's a much easier phase because you've already overcome the struggle with the ego.
I mean, there are times where I feel like I'm in the jungle with the machete and I'm like, don't worry, girlfriend, like you're clearing the path. Just keep going. And I'm like, maybe I need to change that visual, but it really does feel like, you're going through it. And
well, there was a lot of struggle, a lot of suffering, and and again, I can only speak about my experience, but my experience is the reason for that is until I consciously began this process of discovering false beliefs and letting go of them. I was like everybody else. My life was spent repressing them. So, you blame other people or you lie to yourself and justify things. And sure, you suffer before, but the truth is, you're experiencing the tip of the iceberg and the rest of the suffering is in the subconscious. Or once you decide to heal, that iceberg starts rising up and if you're doing it right, you're no longer projecting it out. You're no longer blaming others. You're no longer denying it. You're no longer justifying yourself. So you're in no way mitigating the pain.
Right.
And so the pain gets bigger than it was before. But if you know what you're doing, which I did, you know that you're healing. You know this is a natural part of the process. And so even though on the one hand there's, more suffering than before, on the other hand there's this enlightened awareness that knows what's happening and is pleased and grateful for it. And is able to be patient with it, and you just go through the process. So it's kind of a strange thing to talk about because it's both more suffering than ever experienced before, and at the same time, you're doing what you want to do. You're awakening. So it's a wonderful experience at the same time, a miraculous experience. But I think what happens for a lot of people, I think that when your spiritual goal is to stop suffering, and then this starts getting bigger, it's not what you wanted. It's kind of like a mistaken goal.
Yeah.
Don't go through it. So you really need a stronger purpose. I mean, in the end, like I said, I'm at inner peace. I don't suffer now. In the end, you do get that, but you have to understand, Jesus in the Course says you go through the darkness to the light.
Yeah.
You have to understand that's very literal.
Very.
And if you're just afraid of being uncomfortable, you just turn back to your old defense mechanisms and you never make it through that phase.
You really do. And I love how in the Course, how Jesus at first is like, it takes a little willingness. And then as you grow and you get, of course, totally into it, it really takes a lot of willingness.
Yeah, great willingness, he later says. He changes that story.
Totally. And I just think it's so funny because it's like little breadcrumbs. And then you're like, dude, there is just no compromise. And that's what I love about the Course and studying with Myron. I mean, there's just no compromise. And like you said, you'll just go back. So it's like, if you can't handle the discomfort this time around, well, that's it, so be it. But, just for me personally, I want to really, really awaken as fully as I can in this now.
Well, and in fact, that's what I would say to myself when there was that temptation to turn around. I would say to myself, if you don't face it now, you're just going to have to face it later.
I know.
So you might as well do it now.
You might as well just do it. Go right in there. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. I'd love to chat about Awakening Together and your online spiritual community. You had a very interesting story about how that all kind of unfolded.
Well, what happened was I was guided to take a year of, I call it increased silence rather than silence, because my daughter is in her 5th year of college now, but then she was in high school. And so, she came home from school every day and I had to be a mother. But during the hours that she was at school, which was from about 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., I was in silence and in contemplation for a year. And I made a lot of progress in clarity and realization that year. And then at the end of the year, I was guided to start, and this time the word used to really upset me. It was very hard for me to even tell people, but I was guided to start a church. And I was given a purpose and 5 core values. In fact, they came very, very quickly. I was standing in the kitchen at the time, and the first time they were written down, they were written out on a napkin. And then it just became apparent that was going to be online. I didn't know that at first, but the purpose of Awakening Together is to obviously help people awaken to what we call the one true self. We respect each one as equals. No one has a spiritual intuition over another. Everyone is to find and follow their own inner guidance, and we support each other in that. We see only the unchanging eternal truth as true, and we don't, for example, see A Course in Miracles as true. A Course in Miracles is a pointer, but not the truth. And so we don't get fundamentalist with A Course in Miracles or NTI or any other path. All paths that are useful towards that one truth are accepted in Awakening Together. And we kind of live in the world without being of the world. That's what our 5th core value is all about. It's kind of respecting the experience of the world while remaining focused on the unchanging eternal truth in each of us.
Right.
So that's what, and then we have a minister preparation program, which I always tell people is really a trick. People come into it because they want to be ministers, and they become ministers. But the reason I say it's a trick is because the real reason, the thing that the program is really about is it really helps you to awaken. So it's kind of like the ministership is the carrot, but the real value is the curriculum. And then we have another curriculum called Gentle Healing. It's a 3-year curriculum that people go through that helps them to awaken. And then we also have a retreat house in La Veta, Colorado, where people can come on retreat, and our prices are as low as we can make them and pay the bills. And people can come there either for a personal private retreat alone, or they can come for one of our organized week-long retreats. So we're just all about assisting people while also understanding everybody has their own inner guidance and their own path to follow.
And you hold courses like that are live, or is it recorded, or how does that all work?
MPP has been live. However, we've just recently had people say, I can't make those live classes. So I actually just started last week creating an MPP as the Minister Preparation Program. I just started last week creating another version, which will be recorded so that people who want to take it on their own time can. So there's 2 different ways. You can be in a live class, which of course has its benefits, but again, you got to show up on a certain day at a certain time. So if that doesn't fit some people, then there will be this recorded version. And then gentle healing is also offered live, but it is recorded, and about 50% of the students listen to the recordings rather than showing up for the live course. So that's true for our online stuff. Now, at the retreat house right now, I don't record any of those. There are people who ask me to, but I just have this strong sense it's not the same. You know, it's important to get out of your daily environment, get out of your daily life, come someplace else where this is the sole focus for a week or however long you're there, and to take the words that are said and record them and let people do it at home just wouldn't be the same. So at this point, what isn't recorded are the retreats at the retreat house. Right. I really encourage people to come, and I will tell you, every single person that's come has felt they had shifts while there. So I think that's what the retreat house is for. It's the one thing we have that's not online, right? It's the in-person experience.
I love that. Sounds like something I would like to sign up for immediately. If you could share, your thoughts with someone that maybe is, really struggling and wants to get on this path and has felt guided to, but they just feel a little lost or confused, what's something that you could really share with that person that would help?
Well, that would depend more on the person. I would have to find out more about what's going on, but just kind of as a generalization.
Yeah.
I think that probably what's most important is considering what you really want. If what you really, really want is to travel the world, you should travel the world. If what you really, really want is to have children and raise a family, you should have children and raise a family. If what you really, really want is to awaken, you should focus on the spiritual path. Mm-hmm. I would say trust whatever your greatest calling is, even if it's not the spiritual path. Maybe there's something else that has to be accomplished first. Going against yourself is never going to work.
Yeah.
So sit down and contemplate, what do you really want? Realize how much you want it, and then focus on that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Because I think a lot of people get confused with but I want to do this, but I really want, and you can't really serve two masters. You get really, tangled.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Regina, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to just share your thoughts and your experiences. And of course, we just scratched the surface, and I'd definitely like to have you back next year. And we can talk deeper. And I will put the website up and all that. And if they are so inspired to be like, hey, I want to check that out,
Yeah, we're online, and we even have Sunday morning services every week. And so no matter where someone is, they can join us. Yeah.
And so that's live.
Oh, yeah. We have a live schedule every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So there are live teachings that people can, join into, going on those 3 days of the week all the time.
That sounds awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'd like to tune in on that. You're in Denver, so you're an hour ahead, I think. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you soon, Regina.
Thank you. It was really nice chatting with you.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye. Well, I want to thank Regina Dawn Akers so much for sharing her experiences and her awesome energy. Really loved that. Thank you so much. And again, I look forward to the next time when we be geeking out with you.
Let's talk about life, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the truth